Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
We're getting all existential all of a sudden today, Steve, with all the insanity that's going on in the world. You know, we just briefly talked about that before we got online about, is the world going more nuts than what it ever has or whatever. But it's I'm not saying that we've got all the answers for everyone here, but we might touch on that a little bit in the back end of the episode today. But I feel like we'll get there at some point, and it's always good to keep smiling, I guess.
Oh, well, it's what you have to do, especially when things are feeling very different.
Absolutely. Before we rip into that existential discussion, I'm sure it's going to be wide-ranging and deep. We've got a couple of tech topics that we're going to talk about before that. Did want to just touch on just the experience from last week. Obviously, last week's episode was a bit different because we were able to do it in person, and we had a couple of 4K cameras going and all that sort of stuff with the iPhones, etc., which I quite liked, and I couldn't believe I didn't think of that setup before, but you know, some things become obvious with time. But a couple of points I did want to note was that using the ultra wides was really handy because it allowed me to manufacture another 10 shots out of those two ultra wides, but with zooming and cropping, which is always handy. But the other thing that was interesting was also, not that I would normally do this, but I alternated between the M1 and the M1 MacBook Pro and the 5K iMac that I've got that's running the Intel chips, and it was just interesting watching the difference in performance between the two. I'm not going to by any stretch of the imagination say that the iMac was a slouch or anything. I mean, you remember the good old days of rendering out things for hours and hours before you'd get anything. But it was noticeable that because that timeline was a bit more complicated because there was 3 streams if you include the screen recording that we did, that it actually on the Intel iMac, it actually was flipping around the timeline even in Final Cut was a bit laggy, which I thought was interesting. But the M1, you know, no problems at all, zipping around. And of course the M1 rendered the final clip out, which was a 30-minute clip, which is decent length, did it in 6 minutes, and the Intel iMac did it in 20. And on top of that, the Intel, I've never heard the fan run that loudly on rendering. The M1 MacBook, totally silent. So not saying anything anyone doesn't already know, but it's wonderful when you actually see it actually happening for you.
I hadn't edited for quite a while and been using DaVinci on the M1, and I'm just blown away at how quickly it renders and, how easy it is to use. So I'm feeling the love certainly again for video and for Apple products.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of which, it seems like they might actually be delivering a bit more love down the iOS path. It seems like the new Point release is going to enable Face ID with a mask, something that I believe is a bugbear for both of us, actually, having to type your PIN code out whenever you're outdoors or in a public space or whatever, trying to pay for something, or even just opening your phone. It's curious. I'm not surprised that they're doing this because there've been occasions in the past where Apple's responded to specific, I don't know if you want to call them criticisms, maybe feedback on what might work, and they've actually whether you want to call it swallow their pride or whatever, or figure out a solution for it. Sometimes it's a bit ridiculous, like that. There was those iPhones that had that extra touch layer sensor for the Force Touch back in the day, which was just to enable right-clicking when they could have just figured out another implementation for that didn't require another level of technology added to the device, which has since been removed, by the way. But this is probably a good thing. I mean, the only coverage that I've seen coming out of this is that it stands to reason that if your iPhone is scanning your face and your mask is covering up half your face, that it's going to have to rely on the parts that it can see. So in theory, it might not be quite as secure because, it's effectively only going to be looking at the top half of your face that it can see. But, if they're able to implement it, then it's still handy, I would think.
You don't think they could just put a fingerprint sensor back on the phone?
Maybe that goes back to that other thing about the force touch technology that I was saying. They do it the hard way sometimes.
Look, I've already got friends who like do the Face ID with a mask on, and that works if you set it up that way. So, you know, good on Apple and all that sort of thing. But spend 20 cents a unit to put a fingerprint sensor on. You're already making enough money.
Oh, but you know how it is. It has to be perfect in its implementation.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, there's a few little things in Apple's perfection which just aren't there. And, while they make great products still, it's little things like that so they can make an extra dollar on 100 million units. And, that's not insignificant. So maybe I understand it. But, if they want perfect, jam a USB-C port in the iPhone as well.
Exactly. And maybe before we move on, it would probably be prudent to say that if Steve Jobs was inconvenienced by a face mask, that fingerprint sensor would have made it onto the phone quick smart.
Damn straight. Although I can't ever imagine him having a face mask on.
Yeah, that's true. Very true, very true. All right, so let's move over to Facebook now and Meta, and they made news for notorious reasons this week for basically setting the record for the largest one-day value drop in stock market history. And I think the most surprising thing about this, if you want to call it that, is that they actually lost users for the first time in their history, and also this is the freaky part where they're measuring daily logins. That number's dropped as well, and so it feeds into a narrative of where's that sitting. Poor Zuck, he lost billions of his own personal wealth as well. I'm sure he's not hurting or anything, but is it another question around, this sort of, the market's a bit fickle and all that, but some of that underlying stuff about, is Facebook still relevant? Is it, has it got the strength of its user base anymore? Is it engaging with the younger audiences? And there's big question marks around that, I think.
Oh, look, there's huge. And I just want to start off by saying that, Facebook is, probably, I think, always been overly generous with its numbers in the past to build its enormous influence. So it's very interesting to see them come out and actually admit that they're losing audience, losing logins, and actually losing advertising. And I don't know what they expect us to do, because they haven't offered any solutions in any of this either. I think the thing that we've all come to appreciate in the modern internet age is that 10 years is a long time. I reckon we probably hit peak Facebook between 2012 and 2015, and the way Facebook works is hardwired. You can't just go in and change a bit of algorithm or a bit of code. It's been built the way it's been built, and there are shifts around Facebook now that are actually making it no longer the dominant platform that it was. Its business model around advertising and personalised advertising is falling away. And whether that's people who are just tired of the platform, or whether it's people going, actually, Facebook does know too much about me, or Facebook represents too many things that I don't like about the internet, I don't know. But, I haven't been on Facebook now for 15 months, and at all, I haven't logged in.
And I'm sure you're missing it too.
Well, I sometimes think I should log in, but I don't miss it at all. So I think that's, what Facebook is seeing.
And I'm similar to that, with the caveat of posting our episodes to Facebook to, announce to the world. But apart from that, for personal use, it's just kind of redundant. I guess another component of it too is that there's more competition for social media attention. And I think TikTok was singled out specifically here as potentially taking away audience from Facebook. And I think correct me if I'm wrong. I'll have to look this up again, but I'm pretty sure I read an article this week that was suggesting that TikTok grew off the back of Facebook advertising and now is directly competing with the platform, which is kind of an irony in all of that.
Well, it is, but you can see in each of these instances there's a tech wave. So Facebook was the predominant platform 2012 to 2015. I mean, everyone was on Facebook. If you weren't, you had a problem, or you were creepy or something like that. Then Instagram came to the fore off the back of filter technology, the fact that anyone could take stunning images, create a cult of personality and become an influencer, But they're very static platforms, very static. Facebook is really a basic image and a comment. Instagram is more about the image, and TikTok's about moving image and message, like messaging through video. So effectively, I see TikTok as a blend of Twitter and Facebook all rolled into one.
Not to mention that it's actually, they're more down the line of the attention deficit disorder sort of society that we live in, that they cater for that a lot better than what Facebook itself does now.
And I think, we've seen it with Twitter where people have moved on from their political opinions, although they're still out there on Twitter, but that sort of cycle has moved on, and Facebook was very much about who you support and what you believe in, and that we've moved on from that now. And on TikTok, you get personally what the person you're viewing thinks, and that seems to be enough for anyone. But I got to say that's starting to get pretty limited in terms of an exchange of information, and leaving anyone more knowledgeable.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think we're sort of going into an area which we alluded to at the head of the episode, which was about what's the state of the world at the moment with all of this sort of stuff. Because I guess, you'd be forgiven for thinking, going through a pandemic, the amount of noise it's generated, the amount of polarization that it's sort of, it itself has accelerated. I mean, I know that we had, a lot of political polarization going on before the pandemic started, but this kind of supercharged the whole thing. And, you have to, you ask yourself, we get bombarded with all of these things on social media. What, the media, mainstream media is very sensationalized these days, looking for an angle that'll grab your eyeballs, which is not too dissimilar what social media is doing, but social media is doing it better, arguably. And you might get the sense that that the world is going insane. Essentially, that if you were to follow this literally all day, every day, and just follow it, it's a recipe for mental disaster in so many ways, because you will just get so upset or so angry or just feel so anxious at what's going on that you think maybe we might not last a year, kind of thing. And it's just and I guess the counter argument, and we'll explore this a little bit, is that maybe it was always insane, but the difference now is that everyone has a camera in their pocket and is recording it and is making it all visible. And on top of that, then there's the connection with community and linking people together on social media, which pushes it all even further.
Oh, look, exactly. I think that's really the skew of information and the trade of information now on the internet has gone from a democratization to almost an anarchic sort of situation whereby it's freely accessible, but it's very hard to tell what the value is or what what the meaning or the intent behind a lot of this is. I think you might not have seen it because you don't watch a lot of free-to-air TV, but there's currently a TikTok ad on free-to-air with a very sort of TikTok meme as the focus to it. You should search it out and have a look at it. But to me, it shows people talking about this idea or this meme that has occurred on TikTok, and that to me basically sums everything up. The topic is meaningless, and the people's discussion of this topic is meaningless, but it's presented as something of great importance. And I think that's effectively what's happening with social media across the board, is the posts, information that's being traded, even by traditional news agencies now, is starting to border on the trivial, and you're being told that it's important, and people are starting to talk about these things as if they're important, and perhaps they aren't, whereas things that are important are probably too boring to really be interested in, so we just let them go. And that to me is a very big problem we face now as a society, because if it doesn't have a visceral response, if you can't be outraged about the fact that something terrible has happened, something equally as important that may be innocuous just slides under the radar, and it allows people to behave and do things behind the scenes that you probably would be outraged if you knew about.
Yeah. There were just two other things I wanted to touch on too. Just building on that last point, was that thanks to all of these wonderful devices we have, any of us, if you put in even a modicum amount of effort, can probably produce something that looks professional and easy to digest for anyone. But what's ended up happening is that you get a situation where, say, that whole thing about you can't tell what's legitimate or not. Someone who gets online and says something that is credentialed, has the knowledge, the experience, factual evidence, everything like that, is put on the same level as someone who's got none of those things, and there's like that false equivalency going on. But no one can tell anything about anything anymore. And this whole I'm just asking questions sort of motif that seems to be happening. So now you can't watch anything, and you can't really listen to anyone, because it's all noise now. It's effectively gone into a blender and turned into big noise. It's like an unfortunate artifact of all these wonderful technology that's been developed, that's been put into everyone's hands, and this is how we've used it.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that the visual medium is predominantly an entertainment medium, despite the fact it's been used for important information throughout its existence. But the visual medium is an entertainment medium, and I think as a society, we're starting to get sucked into, if it doesn't capture my attention, it's not important, and it leads to the polarization we see, and a lot of the, I think, activities and perhaps conflict that we see in the world.
And just quickly to wrap up, this whole notion of the world being insane can feel like it is, but it's probably important. I'll agree that the polarization and the sort of slow sliding of civil discourse is unique potentially to now, maybe, but there have been other. It's not as if there haven't been times in the world before where I think people have felt deep sense of anxiety about the outcome of the world, for instance. I'm sure there were many events during the 20th century where I'm sure that people were feeling super anxious about what was going on in the world and whether they would survive or not. So many millions of people dying in wars, or the threat of nuclear holocaust, or being shipped off to through conscription to fight wars overseas, or any of this sort of stuff. These sorts of things have been in the background. What is different now, obviously, is that sort of decentralization and polarization of discussion, etc., which kind of has gone away from, the good guys and bad guys, which kind of might have typified how things were sort of viewed back in the day. And I'm only just saying 20th century, don't even go back even further than that, with all the chaos and stuff that was going on as us humans have been fighting each other, for centuries before that in much bloodier terms. So I guess it's probably important to try and see if you can get a bit of perspective around that as well, because we're creative as a species. It seems like we're creative at creating different types of conflict for ourselves, it would seem.
Absolutely, and I think this is the hallmark, and not trying to pin this on Facebook, but Facebook represents this, particularly well, is that we've managed to personalise our fears. In the past, the threat was always external, even if it was existential. You could either buy into it or not buy into it to varying degrees. However, now we've managed to personalize fear, so it just presses all your buttons, and what frightens me is different to what frightens the person down the road, but the algorithms out there know exactly how to press your buttons.
And on that wonderful note, we might wrap it up there. Let's hope we can see our way through this over the next 50 years will be interesting. Let's put it that way.
And this will resolve. Humans will endure one way or another.
Absolutely. All right. So don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.